So the whole reincarnation play you ask about, the truth is, you're never incarnated. You are never incarnate in the meat, which is what it literally means. You associate with and you pervade or permeate a body, mind, chloe, mental, bodily form. But we all know, like from deep dreamless sleep, that all of that is surrendered to oblivion. You're happy to die to the whole mind, body, chloe play, and whatever your name is in the subtle realms, where you're not tied to this body and whatever name your parents gave you. But what are your names in other realms, in other lifetimes, other dimensions? So, you're never stuck in the meat. As my old mystic friend Douglas Harding, the British mystic, would say, you're not the little man or woman, the little homunculus peeping out at the world through the two peepholes, as he would say. You're associated with mind, body, but you're not trapped in it or really essentially defined by it. You sport as this, it's a play. And it's because you are awareness playing as the power of consciousness that everything feels so vivid. That's why the body seems alive, otherwise it's a corpse. And if you've been around someone who is alive, and then the spirit once and for all left the body, no longer even a coma, dead, all the difference in the world. That's why this experience feels so vivid. It's because of consciousness, not because of atoms or molecules or cells or clusters of cells, organs and tissues. That's not why there's a vividness to this so-called incarnation or reincarnation. It's because you, the personal consciousness, through the power of primordial consciousness, rooted in absolute awareness, Siva, animate all of this, enliven it, spark it up, fire it with the living flame of love. So the sages, the freed beings, simply are no longer compulsorily tied through their own compulsions to being fascinated with any of this as a realm or venue for indulging a selfish me. Selfless, they're free to feel self-full as the self of each and every self. Their pleasure is in the sympathetic joy, mudita, as the Buddha called it, for the pleasures of all beings. So they don't need to pig out on their own selfish pleasure. Now, mind you, as Yoga Vasishta said, the classic Bible for non-dual wisdom aspirants, if pleasure comes, the sage does not neurotically strategize to avoid it in some biophobic, unhealthy, ashamed way. The sage enjoys the pleasures that come naturally and that don't tie the awareness in the form of the personal consciousness in a narrow, selfish way. And when pleasures leave, the sage does not pursue them. Go ahead, Bob.
I've heard about some people were non-returners.
Yeah, that's an old Buddhist expression. There's a model. The Buddha says waking up from the me dream will basically involve 4 stages. The last one being nirvana, nibbana in the old Pali language, utter freedom, being the absolute in all clarity. First stage is called the 7 lifetimes. It's called stream entering stage or phase. You've dipped your foot, maybe your whole leg, the lower body into the stream, you're wet. You're not dry anymore, you're wet with the flowing current that's taking you back to the source. See, in Buddhist language, it's an upside down anti-gravity world. And the stream pulls you back to the source, doesn't carry you further downstream. So the Buddha said what is involved in becoming someone who just enters the stream and at most only has 7 more lifetimes involved in the gross plane world. Such a entry-level sage, free being, has given up 3 things. One is the firm belief on an intellectual or philosophical level that there's a separate me self that will persist forever, and that's my real fulfillment, is as a separate self. It's like L. Ron Hubbard's Scientology idea of being a separate, unique thetan for the rest of eternity, or the Sankhyoga's tradition that you're all these different purushas, these individual eternal selves. The Buddha and the ancient Advaita non-dual Vedanta of the Upanishads blast that view to smithereens. Pure spirits can't have any boundaries between each other. How can there be multiplicity? There's the one awareness, the one spirit that manifests as a multitude of souls. Now, so the Buddha says, give up. I'm not saying you'll lose all sense of selfishness immediately, but give up the belief in a permanent me that's going to go to some heaven or thetan state or whatever. The second factor is give up the unhealthy forms of spiritual doubt. The doubt that anyone can really wake up from the me sense. The doubt that there really is anything to all this spiritual mumbo-jumbo. Give up that doubt. It doesn't serve you. It's just creating vacillating. Because you see, with that doubt, it's too easy to slip back into forms of selfish hedonism, pleasure-mongering. I tried meditating for 12 years. It didn't work. Give me sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Some of the neuroscientists are saying, the mind is just brain-based states and processes, so this body dies, I'm oblivion, nothing matters. The Buddha said, give up those kind of doubts. The third thing was give up the forms of magic and superstition, the forms of trying to placate the cosmos through superstitious actions and rituals. Try to give up the kind of what unfortunately afflicts too many dualistic forms of conventional religion, the idea of trying to please God or measure up by strategizing how you can do good to others, but the whole thing is unfortunately rooted in this sickness, this dis-ease of me trying to impress everyone, trying to be a do-gooder. So the Buddha said, give up those kind of magical ritual superstitions of trying to manipulate the cosmos. If you give up those three, you've so defueled the momentum of selfishness that at most, 7 more lifetimes. Buddha might have added parenthetically, give or take a lifetime. Now, you then identified a second stage beyond stream entry, at most 7 times returning scenario. The second scenario is what's called a once returner. They've let go of those first 3 elements or factors that constrain people to these compulsory rebirth rounds, the rounds of samsara, what the Buddha speaks of as wandering on and on and on without ever coming to clarity and rest, a real fulfillment, a real liberation. That second one-time returner stage or scenario involves 2 further achievements. I use that word cautiously because it's ultimately not an achievement for a me. It's what you are as the absolute, disentangling yourself, getting free of the net or the prison of me and my. And the 4th and 5th ones here are simply thinning out to a certain extent, not even perfectly or completely, but just thinning out, melting, softening to a certain extent, attachment and aversion. The binding likes and dislikes. Just thinning these out, the Buddha said, allows for more of that kind of being pulled upstream back to source, not just at the mercy of all your tendencies that are kind of pulling you downstream and all the involvements and entanglements and everything. A non-returner is someone who still has the 5 higher fetters, but they don't need to work them out on this physical plane, and so the Buddha calls them non-returners. Yeah, that's why the Pure Land Buddhists, kind of dominant popular religion throughout East Asia, and certainly similar tendencies in Tibet, Nepal, and so forth. The Pure Land traditions talk about the great Bodhisattva, Amitayus or Amitabha, Guanyin in Chinese, Chenrezig in Tibet, Kannon in Japan, Kwanseum in Korea, Guanam in Vietnam. The ancient Bodhisattva who's prepared this perfect Buddha field, the Western Pure Land paradise, in which all beings, if they're just sincere, at death, Amitabha will pull them into that realm. It's a non-regressing realm, and they will never have to take birth in a dense physical plane and maybe risk wandering on and on for lifetime after lifetime. Now they can work out clarity and all freedom, coming back to perfect awakening while in the Pure Land. So a non-returner being is like in a Pure Land. Now, what is an arhat or a Buddha? A perfect being, utterly free, absolutely awake, no longer caught in the me dream and its complications and ramifications. They are free of all the various forms of conceit, attachment to subtle plane realms, the subtlest kinds of ignorance that feels like there's any separation. So for instance, some of the highest God-level beings have this tremendously benevolent, the love of all the Bodhisattvas and Buddhas, all the Mother Teresas and Dalai Lamas and you name it, Lamas, rolled into one. They feel that for every being in the cosmos. They're like the highest personal consciousness being in the cosmos, feeling like they just have all this love for all these beings, but there's still a subtle sense of separateness, of being the one who's atop the cosmos, who in all sincerity wants to help all these beings, and has all these powers, and can help. And many of the miracles that get worked, the paranormal things, are by the grace of these kind of beings. But the Buddha said there is a reality more original, freer, more awake, even from the dream of being the highest God in the highest heaven. In real awakeness, you are not at all separate from the innermost self of all the beings. You are beyond the worlds and yet can freely play in all the worlds. The plight of some of the high heaven beings is that they're very attached to the subtle planes. They really have qualms about associating with like the hell realms or taking on a human birth again. But the free Buddhas, the true avatars, the real free beings, they have no qualms about reassociating with this earth plane. So reincarnation, there's a kind of rebirth or taking birth anew out of freedom. It's not compulsory. This is a different kind of being associated with the carne, the meat, than people that are driven to rebirth on this physical plane because of their selfish samskaras.